So, people can have many different opinions about many important issues of life. For example, if there is an afterlife, or if there is God, in these questions, I think intellectual people have come to a certain range of opinions, and that's really not such a great divide between the educated and informed people about these things. However, there's one thing that is really interesting, which is many words interpretation of quantum mechanics. Now, quantum mechanics is really mysterious, and uh, if you quote Richard Feynman, nobody understands quantum mechanics. It's so mysterious, and one of the most fundamental aspects of quantum mechanics is the wave function collapse process. You have wave function, but if you make a measurement, you have a certain definite, reality of the world. But the question is, how did that reality come to pass? And before the measurement, it was just a wave function, with probability distribution. But if you make a measurement, you have a definite position for a particle and so on. So how did that happen? And it is one of the most rigorously and logically consistent interpretation of the quantum mechanics. In a way, it's really strange, but the many worlds interpretation is, if you start from the premise that the world actually branches at the time of measurement, and there would be many worlds, many different worlds with all the different possible results for observation. So the world is actually branching all the time. So this is a many worlds interpretation. So, for example, to make a really daily life level analogy, I had miso ramen yesterday, but I could have had pork cutlet, and I made a choice to have a miso ramen. But there might be a world where I had pork cutlet, or in your life, you sometimes make career choices, and I made the career choice to go into neuroscience and then to study consciousness. But then there could have been different worlds where I could have made different career choices, and so according to the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, there are these different worlds where you have made different choices, and where the world have has branched into many different worlds, and all these worlds have an equal ontological footing. They exist on equal footing. So that's a many worlds interpretation. This is really strange, to say the least, outwardly, literary. But many people, many really highly intelligent people, studying physics and quantum mechanics, they have come to the conclusion that the many worlds interpretation is perhaps the only logically consistent, coherent interpretation of the quantum mechanics. And this is really weird. So if you take a poll among physicists and scientifically minded people, probably you would have 50-50 divide. Probably 50% of people say they believe in the many worlds interpretation, and the other half would say, oh, they don't believe in the many worlds interpretation. This is a really interesting divide, in that those people who are really knowledgeable about what the quantum mechanics entails uh, actually come to have really different worldviews with associated sensitivities and Weltanschauungs, and all these things. And so it's quite interesting. And so this many worlds interpretation divide is one of the most interesting intellectual divides that we have in today's world. So there are many different divides, like, for example, if it is possible to produce consciousness artificially. But in the field of artificial consciousness, we do not have this kind of divide yet. For example, if you believe in the mind uploading scenario when in which you upload your the patterns of synaptic connections in your brain into a machine, and then you claim that the machine is conscious, so that okay, now you have a copy of yourself. So maybe your biological self can be destroyed because your digital self will have an eternal life and so on. Unfortunately, in this artificial consciousness scenario, there's not such a interesting divide as the mini-world's interpretation divide, in which those really intellectual, highly knowledgeable, educated, informed people do have a really alternative interpretation, a Weltanschauung of what's going on. So in artificial consciousness, we don't have that divide. In other words, it could be said that if you can come to a point where you have this kind of really interesting divide, as in the case of many worlds interpretation divide, then you can say that the field has matured into a really interesting stalemate situation. So I think it is a tribute to the quantum mechanical, models that people can have this really interesting difference of opinions as to whether the mini world's interpretation makes any sense at all.